My son told me I should live simpler at my age. 2 weeks later, his mortgage, his cars, and the life he built on my money all collapsed in the same morning. I didn't raise my voice, but that was the day I stopped paying for a family that no longer had room for me. Before I go on, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, and maybe tell me where you're listening from. Every story I share carries a piece of my life, and knowing someone out there is listening truly means more than I can say. Thank you for being here. I'm Robert Hayes, 75 years old, and most mornings begin the same way. A slow stretch, a small groan, the soft creak of the floorboards I've walked across for nearly 4 decades. My house isn't grand by anyone's standards. Just a little brick place at the end of Walnut Street, peeling paint on the back steps, a roof that sighs whenever the wind shifts. But it's mine. Every corner holds a memory. And at my age, memories carry a value nothing else can match. I make my coffee the same way each day, black, strong, steady. I stand by the counter for a minute, letting the steam touch my face. Some folks pray, some journal. I simply breathe, let the morning settle into my bones before the world starts tugging again. For a long time, I believed I had peace. Not perfect peace, but the kind a widower earns after years of working, raising children, weathering storms, and finding small joys in quiet places. But my son, Michael, his life runs loud. And somehow, his noise kept flowing into mine. He's not a cruel man, just a man who grew accustomed to comfort. Comfort that quietly came from me. It started small, a missed insurance payment, then a late credit card bill, then the car repairs, the private school fees, the temporary loan for a renovation they didn't need. Back then, I told myself, I'm helping my boy stand up again. But help becomes habit. Habit becomes expectation, and expectation becomes entitlement. Before long, I was paying more of their life than my own. Still, I went every Sunday. Same routine. Michael greeted me with half a hug, already distracted. His wife, Vanessa, offered a polite smile that never warmed her eyes. And then there was Lily, the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me. Lily, that girl, was light in human form. 19 now. Gentle. Thoughtful. The kind of young woman who listens with her whole face. She'd sit beside me on their perfect white couch, the one I never felt right leaning on, and whisper, "Grandpa, are you doing okay?" I'd always say, "Of course, sweetheart." But she looked deeper than my answer every time. Funny how children can see what grown-ups refuse to. Most evenings, I'd come home to my quiet house, cook for one, sit in the soft chair by the window, watch the sun slide across the floor. It wasn't loneliness, just a life that had settled into gentle routine. I clipped coupons. I patched my old jacket. I made things stretch, like my parents taught me. Meanwhile, Michael and Vanessa upgraded phones every year, vacationed twice a summer, hired landscapers, all on a lifestyle paid for by my quiet sacrifices. But I kept giving, because that's what fathers do, right? We give. We support. We catch. Until one morning, as I stood in my little kitchen with the smell of coffee rising, a quiet thought drifted in. Do they ever wonder what I need? It wasn't anger. It was the ache of a bruise I didn't know I had. I brushed it off. Poured my coffee. Checked the mailbox. Went on with my day. But that question stayed with me, like a thread tugging gently at a seam. Michael called often, but never just to talk. Always a reason. Always an ask. Dad, the water heater broke. Dad, the kids need new tablets. Dad, it's been a tough month. Could you handle the utilities? And every time I said yes, not because I wanted to, because saying no felt like failure. I didn't see it then, but I was the only one bending. One Saturday afternoon, dusting the shelf where my wife's picture sits, I caught my reflection in the glass. Gray hair, tired eyes. A man who had given and given until he forgot how to keep anything for himself. And still, I told myself it was love. Love makes gentle fools of us, softens our spine in ways we don't notice until it hurts. But peace, real peace, doesn't come from pretending. It comes from truth. And my truth, well, it was beginning to whisper louder than I cared to admit. I didn't know it then, but the comfort I'd built for them, the sacrifices I made in silence, the life they expected me to carry, that peace was about to end. Not quietly, not gently, but completely. And I was nowhere near ready for it. The night everything shifted didn't look remarkable. Just a quiet Tuesday. The kind where the streetlights hum and the world feels half asleep. Michael had called earlier that afternoon. "Dad, we're having a small dinner tonight. Just family. You should come." His voice had a warmth I hadn't heard in months. It made something in me soften. So I put on my good shirt, polished my shoes, even baked a lemon loaf, his childhood favorite, the one he used to ask for when life felt too heavy for his little shoulders. At 6 o'clock sharp, I stood on their porch. The house glowed from the inside, laughter spilling through the windows. For a moment, I let myself believe I was stepping back into something familiar. Some old version of family. Then the door opened. Vanessa stood there in a sleek black dress, a delicate champagne flute in her hand. Her smile froze when she saw me holding the loaf. "Oh, Robert," she said, voice tilting upward in surprise. "You actually came." That word, actually, cut sharper than it should have. Before I could speak, Michael appeared behind her. Not beside her. Behind her. Far enough that I could already feel the distance. "Hey, Dad," he said, rubbing his neck. "We didn't expect you to, bring anything." "I thought it might be nice," I replied softly. Vanessa flicked a glance over her shoulder toward the dining room. Crystal glasses, folded linen napkins, a table set like something out of a wedding magazine. Then she stepped outside just enough to block the view. "So, tonight is a bit more formal," she said, lowering her voice like she was offering me a kindness. "It's more of an elevated gathering, curated." Curated. As if my presence didn't match the decor. "I can still join you," I said, keeping my tone gentle. "I won't be any trouble." Her smile tightened. "Oh, it's not about trouble. It's about comfort. For the guests. And for you. Comfort. For the guests. The same guests whose lives, whose literal comfort, I'd been funding for years." Michael stood behind her, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes drifting away. Not a word from him. Not a step toward me. "So," Vanessa continued, "tonight just isn't the best night. These things can feel uncomfortable for older guests. Older guests. In my son's home. The home I helped them keep." My fingers tightened around the warm loaf tin, steadying myself, not resisting. "I see," I said, the words barely above a breath. A silence followed. A silence full of things no one had the courage to say out loud. "Well," Vanessa said lightly, "we should get back. The caterer is about to serve the first course." Caterer. Not a family dinner. A performance. A showcase of a life built on my quiet sacrifices. I thought, just for a second, that Michael might step forward. Say something. Anything. Invite me in anyway. But all he offered was, "We'll catch up another time, Dad. Okay?" Another time. Later. Maybe. Never. I nodded because that's what old men do when a truth hurts more than expected. "Of course," I whispered. I turned and walked down the steps, slow and careful. Every step felt heavier, like I was leaving more behind than just a dinner invitation. I set the lemon loaf on their porch railing, not out of anger, out of something deeper. A quiet surrender of a gesture that no longer had a place inside that house. When I reached my car, my hand paused on the door handle. Something inside me shifted. Not rage, not humiliation, just a deep, hollow stillness. But that, I murmured to myself, wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part came the next morning. Lily called. Her voice trembled right through the speaker. "Grandpa, I heard Mom and Dad talking about you." A pause. "I can't even repeat everything they said. They called you a burden. They said you live too comfortably for someone who contributes so little." The phone felt cold in my hand. Contributes so little. I had covered their mortgage for 6 years, paid their insurance, their school fees, their emergencies, all the things they forgot to mention when bragging about their stable life. "Grandpa?" she whispered. "You're quiet." "I'm all right," I said, though my voice betrayed me. "You're not," she replied, her tone soft but sure. "Can I come over tonight?" I wanted to protect her from the tension, but the truth was, I needed her company more than I wanted to admit. After the call, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, not thinking, just standing, letting the ache wash through me. It didn't feel like anger, more like a door quietly shutting inside my chest. When the hurt settled, something else rose in its place. Not loud, not sharp, just quiet and certain. I would not stay silent, not anymore. Lily arrived that evening just as she promised. I heard her car door close softly, then her light footsteps on the porch, and finally a gentle knock, the kind of knock someone uses when they care about your heart more than your routine. When I opened the door, she didn't say a single word. She stepped right in and wrapped her arms around me. A long, grounding hug, the kind that makes the rest of the world fall quiet. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice tight, "you don't deserve what they said." I swallowed hard and rested a hand on her back, patting gently before leading her inside. We settled in the living room, me in my old armchair, her curled up on the couch beneath the blanket my wife knitted years ago. The lamp beside us flickered softly, painting the room in warm amber. For a brief moment, everything felt still. Then the stillness shifted. When I started talking, when I retold what happened on that porch, the air changed. I told her about the door, the cold politeness, the careful words crafted to exclude, the way Michael stood back, letting someone else decide my place in the family. Lily listened without interrupting. Her eyes never left mine, soft, full of hurt on my behalf. She wasn't judging. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was simply present. When I finished, she let out a breath that shook a little. "Grandpa, that wasn't a dinner. That was them choosing their pride over their father." I rubbed my knees, old bones reminding me of years I carried more weight than I admitted. "I should have seen it coming," I murmured. "I kept helping because I thought I was needed. But now I'm not sure whether they needed me or just what came from my wallet." "No," she said with quiet conviction. "They used you because it was easy, because you never asked for anything back." Her words settled in the room like dust catching the light. I looked around then, at the framed photographs, the worn furniture, the soft shadows dancing on the walls. A house lived in. A house built with effort, sacrifice, and years of giving. "Do you remember," I asked, "when your dad lost his job in 2014? They were weeks away from losing their home." She nodded. "I remember you came and stayed with us. You cooked dinner, fixed the sink, helped with my baby brother. You held that whole house together." A small, tired smile tugged at my mouth. "Well, that was part of it. I paid their mortgage for almost 2 years, quietly, without asking for anything. They would have lost everything." Lily's face softened with something deeper than sympathy. "Grandpa," she whispered, "they didn't forget." I shook my head slowly. They didn't forget. They just stopped caring. The room settled into a long silence after that. Not heavy, just honest. Two people sitting inside a truth that couldn't be avoided anymore. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. A soft, rhythmic sound that somehow made the ache in my chest feel sharper and gentler at the same time. Lily rose from the couch and wandered to the old bookshelf. She picked up a photo frame. Michael at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, proud as ever holding a model airplane we built together, his little face beaming with trust. "You were his hero," she whispered. "You still are, even if he forgot what that means." I stared at that picture, and something inside me shifted, not breaking, not hardening, just rearranging. Grief doesn't scream. It seeps. It moves quietly through the halls of your life. It sits with you in old armchairs and whispers to you at night when the house settles. And that night it sat right beside me. Memories floated in and out, late nights fixing their car, showing up with groceries after a tough month, holding my grandson while Michael and Vanessa argued upstairs. All the ways I had been present, all the ways they had moved on. Lily came back to my side, leaned gently against my arm. "You don't have to keep giving to people who take without looking back," she said softly. I let out a long breath, one of those breaths that feels like it carries years of silence. "I've been thinking about that," I admitted. "Maybe I've been teaching them the wrong lesson." Her eyes lifted to mine. "What do you mean?" "That love has no boundaries. That money has no limits. That support doesn't need gratitude. that a father should never say no. Lily's expression melted into something tender. But love does have boundaries, I continued, and respect does require effort. Comfort, well, comfort should be earned, not taken for granted. For the first time in a very long while, I felt still, balanced, clear. "Grandpa," she whispered, "what are you thinking of doing?" I looked at her, really looked at her, her gentle eyes, her steady compassion, her quiet strength. "I'm going to think," I said, very carefully. A soft calm filled the room. Not peace, not yet, but the shape of something new forming. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, my resolve grew steadier. When she finally stood to leave, she held both my hands. "You deserve better," she said. "Please don't forget that." After she drove away, I walked through the quiet house, touching the back of a chair, straightening a picture frame, running my hand along the railing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was awake, awake in a way I hadn't been in years, and that night, lying in the dark, I whispered to myself, "It's time to stand up for myself, and the first step is silence." The next morning, I woke up before the sun, not from worry, but from something steadier, a kind of quiet clarity I hadn't felt in years. I sat up slowly, letting my feet touch the cold floor. It felt like standing at the edge of a long overlooked decision. I boiled water for tea, listening to the soft hum of the kettle, and for once my mind wasn't drifting toward Michael's bills or Vanessa's endless emergencies. My thoughts stayed right here, inside my own home, inside my own life. When I opened the drawer with all my paperwork, the wood groaned a little, like even it was tired of holding things together. There they were, statements, copies, letters, receipts for payments they never saw and never cared to ask about. Page after page of my life poured into theirs. I laid everything across the table. Each piece of paper looked like a tiny confession, and for the first time, I didn't look at it with shame or habit. I looked at it with honesty. This wasn't generosity anymore. This was erosion. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "It's time." Not with anger, not with fire, just with certainty. I made a list in a yellowed notebook, the same notebook I used to track my carpentry business decades ago. Column 1. What I give. Column 2. What I lose. Column 3. What I keep. The first two filled fast. The third stayed almost empty. That settled it. I grabbed my coat, slid my old boots on, and stepped outside into the cool morning air. My breath fogged lightly as I locked the door behind me, a door I suddenly realized had been closed on me more often than on them. My first stop was the bank. The glass doors looked taller today. Maybe because I wasn't walking in as a man weighed down by obligation, but as a man reclaiming what belonged to him. "Morning, Mr. Whitford," the teller said. I asked for someone who knew my history, someone who'd seen those years after my wife passed, someone who remembered when respect was still part of how people spoke to elders. "Is Elaine here?" I asked. She was. She ushered me into her office with that same gentle expression I'd seen decades ago. "What can I do for you?" she asked. I placed the stack of papers on her desk. "My entire financial life," I said quietly, "needs a change." She didn't rush me. She didn't question my clarity. She didn't assume I was confused or overwhelmed. She simply listened. "I want every automatic payment canceled," I told her. "All of them." When she started typing, it felt like watching old chains loosen one link at a time. "How many payments are we talking about?" she asked. 116, I said softly. I counted. She paused, her eyes meeting mine with a kind of thoughtful respect. "All right," she said. "We'll suspend them today, permanently." While she entered each cancellation, I just sat there, hands folded, shoulders easing just a little. Every click of her keyboard felt like reclaiming another inch of my life. I wasn't done yet. When the final confirmation printed out, she slid it toward me gently. Then she asked in a careful voice, "Is everything okay at home?" I considered that, then answered honestly, "Everything is exactly how it's always been, and that is the problem." Elaine nodded, slowly, knowingly. "There's one more thing," I said. She looked up. "I need to revoke the financial power of attorney I gave my son." For the first time, her expression shifted, surprise, then understanding. "Of course," she said softly. "We can take care of that today." It took signatures, confirmations, quiet steps that felt louder than any words I could have spoken to my son. When the ink dried, she closed the folder and said, "You've made strong decisions." I shook my head slightly. "No. I've made overdue ones." When I stepped outside, the morning air felt brighter. Colder, yes, but clearer. Like I'd been walking through fog for years and finally stepped into open space. But I wasn't finished. I drove across town to the law office where Harold, my attorney, had been handling my affairs for almost 20 years. When he saw me, he stood up from his chair and shook my hand with the warmth of someone who remembered my wife's funeral like it was yesterday. "What brings you in, Patrick?" he asked. I sat down, straightened my jacket, and said the words calmly. "I need to change my will." There was a long pause, not uncomfortable, just meaningful. "Tell me what's happened," he said. "I won't be leaving anything to Michael," I said, "and I want a living trust for Lily. Something protected. Something only she can access." Harold didn't question my emotion. He didn't pry into family drama. He simply nodded with solemn respect. "Then let's begin," he said. For the next hour, we went through papers, trust structures, beneficiary updates, protections Michael couldn't get around even with a team of lawyers. I wasn't acting from anger. I wasn't acting from spite. I was acting from self-preservation. When the final signature was done, Harold leaned back and said quietly, "This will give you peace." I nodded. It already has. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a kind of grounded, quiet strength. The kind a man discovers only when he stops trying to earn respect from those who never intended to give it. As I closed the car door and rested my hands on the steering wheel, one truth settled into place. The stage was set. All I had to do now was wait. 2 weeks later, the storm finally broke, not with yelling, not with confrontation, but with a single phone call. It was Michael. I heard the tension in the first 3 seconds. Fast breathing. A tight throat. Panic wrapped in a thin layer of forced calm.
"Dad, hey, listen. Something's wrong with our accounts."
I exhaled softly through my nose. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just closure beginning to take shape. "What kind of wrong?" I asked. "Well, the mortgage bounced. The car payment bounced. Even the utilities. It says everything was canceled. All at once. Is this some kind of error?" I let silence hang between us. A long, steady silence that made my heartbeat sound louder in my own ears. "Dad?" he pressed. "What's going on?" Truth was, I could have told him everything right there. I could have said I canceled every payment I'd carried for years. I could have reminded him of every moment he treated my help like a guarantee instead of a kindness. But revenge, real revenge, isn't delivered with shouting. It's delivered with truth. Calm, unshakable truth. "Michael," I said gently, "for years I paid for things you never once asked about. You assumed they were taken care of. You assumed I would always be there to carry the weight." He was quiet for a moment, too quiet. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I continued, "that I stepped back. I stopped funding a life I was no longer welcome in." A sharp breath. Then, "So, you did this? You ruined everything?" "No," I said softly. "I just stopped fixing everything." There was a shift in his tone, not anger. Fear. "Dad, we can't afford these payments without your help. You can't just drop this on us." I closed my eyes, letting his words land. Words that might have hurt once, but not anymore. "Michael," I said, "I didn't drop anything on you. I simply returned the life you built back to your own hands." A long silence. Long enough that I could hear movement in the background. Vanessa whispering, her voice sharp and panicked. Then she grabbed the phone. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" I answered with a steadiness I didn't know I still had. "Yes, I've given you the freedom you wanted, the independence you claimed I was interfering with." "You're being manipulative," she snapped. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied. My silence wasn't punishment. It was self-respect. She sputtered, audibly, then pushed the phone back to Michael. "You tried again." "Dad, please. We have kids. We have responsibilities. We need time. Just reinstate the payments for a little while. That time is over, I said. Those 4 words settled like dust in sunlight. Soft, inevitable. Dad, he whispered. What do you want from me? I paused. Not for effect, but because I needed to feel the weight of my answer. I want a son who sees me, who respects boundaries, who doesn't confuse my love with my wallet. I want a family that doesn't close the door in my face on Thanksgiving night. The line fell silent again, then barely audible. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it, but I also believed he wasn't ready to understand it. Not yet. I spoke gently. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to reclaim myself. Another silence, but this time it wasn't hostile, just heavy, real. Dad, are you okay? He finally asked. The simplest question, the hardest truth. For the first time in years, I said, yes. I heard him exhale, long, shaky. Maybe realization, maybe fear, maybe the first click of a mind accepting consequences. But revenge, real revenge, didn't happen on that phone call. It happened the next day. Harold called me. Patrick, he said, the trust is finalized. Lily is now the sole beneficiary. Everything is protected. Your son cannot contest it. I closed my eyes and let that settle into my chest. Not joy, not victory. Peace. A deep, steady peace. Later that afternoon, Michael arrived at my house unexpectedly. He stood on the porch, the same porch where I had once been treated like a burden. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. Dad, he said, voice trembling, we need to talk. I stepped outside, slowly, deliberately. He started explaining, fast, desperate, tangled words about bills and pressure and mistakes. Vanessa stood behind him, arms crossed, expression brittle. I listened, not unkindly, but clearly. When he finished, I placed a hand on his shoulder. Michael, I said softly, I love you, but love without respect becomes expectation. And expectation becomes entitlement. His eyes filled, not with anger, but something closer to regret. I understand, he whispered. I really do. I nodded. You'll rebuild, you'll stand on your own, and that will be good for you. He swallowed and looked away. Vanessa stepped forward. So that's it, she said. You're cutting us off? No, I said gently. I'm letting you grow. She didn't understand. Michael did. He nodded slowly, a tired acceptance in his eyes. And in that quiet, heavy moment, I felt something shift inside me. A release. A breath I'd been holding for years. Not triumph. Not gloating. Freedom. And in that silence, I tell you now, I finally felt free. Life looks different now. Quieter. Calmer. Not because the world changed, but because I finally stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. Some mornings I sit on my porch, coffee steaming in my hands, watching the sun rise over the yard I tended long before my children had homes of their own. And I think about everything that led me here, the late nights fixing broken things, the quiet sacrifices, the bills paid without applause, the love given freely. I don't regret any of it. A parent shouldn't regret loving. But loving doesn't mean letting yourself disappear. I learned that the hard way. When they said I lived too comfortably, they never realized the truth. I lived that way because I built my life with my own 2 hands. I earned it. I maintained it. And somewhere along the way, they mistook my generosity for obligation. Taking back that life wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was simply coming home to myself. And yes, I repeated the title phrase once more. They said I lived too comfortably, but all I did was reclaim the comfort I had created. Lily visits often now. Sometimes we sit in silence, sometimes we talk for hours. She reminds me that the next generation can still carry kindness, and that not all love fades into convenience. Michael and I, we're not perfect, but there's respect beginning to grow again, slowly, carefully. The kind of respect that can only come when a parent stops rescuing a child from consequences. I don't know what the future holds. I don't expect apologies, and I don't expect miracles. What I expect, what I deserve, is peace, and I have it now. Maybe that's the real lesson in all this, that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you close gently so you can breathe again. And maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's simply being able to sleep in peace again. If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments. And if my story meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you subscribe for more.